Hey everybody, it's Hasterle here. So I'm doing a recording this time. So I'm just doing a one-off video real quick to show you just for skills. So we're going over the general skills and character creation, what character creation looks like. I'm going to save attributes for another day because especially if you've seen the streams, attributes can be a little bit tricky. So we'll see here without just like going through and literally documenting them all, seeing what they change. So I'm going to go over kind of the skills. What do I know from their website? Because DarkDIRE, the DarkDIRE website will have most of this information on there as well. There is a little hidden information I can give you. So consider this kind of like a look at skills and a look at everything else. So I'll go ahead and get started. So we're going to start off with the skills on here. We're going to pretty much go down skills based off of what we see here. So main skills. So pretty much main skill, you can pretty much pick anything. Defensive skills are going to be a little bit different. So sword, sword's going to get abilities that include a lot of debuffs. Sword's going to go over, swords can go from everything from an attack debuff, so they like swordsman counter, which is attack debuff, swordsman feint, defense debuff, swordsman riposte, lunge, and bleeding cut, which is basically a shield, expose, and damage. All stuff that's pretty much your well-rounded kind of attack character. And it's only one-handed. You can have a scabbard in your other hand, or a shield, or something like that, or do pairing with it. But basically, your other hand is open and free for either a scabbard or a shield. Hammer. It's basically, hammers are control. They're going to do like things like your stuns. I'll actually read off their abilities real quick. For which their abilities are the same as the two-handed versions, but they just do more damage. So crush armor, crushing snare, swing back, and head ringer, which is expose, control, snare control, knockback control, and stun control. So all those basically mean on your swing, when you cast it, when you swing and hit, everyone who gets hit will get that effect. So if you swing with a sword, or in this case a mace, and hit everyone with a ability, a melee ability, it's going to affect all of them, at least from my experience. Okay, so we're going to go to axe. Axe is the far more offensive one of the two. It gets an actual damage and attack boost. It's good for if you definitely want to play the barbarian kind of class of just going crazy high damage. In fact, the game creator themselves has put a build out called the Conqueror build. It's relevant to this. It's very good for that. I think the other two skills is it gets a swing through and swing true, which is buff damage and then buff attack. Split, which is a defense debuff, and chop, which is a slashing expose, which exposes are basically going to make them weaker that kind of damage. Very important for if you've been seeing our stream, which is basically kind of more of an adventure through rather than we're trying to follow a little bit of a narrative with Drusus, the Prophet of the Titans campaign we're doing. Basically, what we're doing with what he's doing is he's doing probably going to go down spears, and he's probably going to go down Prophet or Follower of the Titans, which has a whole bunch of different abilities, and spear has a whole bunch of exposes. So by exposing them, they become weaker to all that stuff. So you have that going for you. Or you could do, if you wanted to do a Follower of the Titans character yourself, you could just, let's say, do two-handed axe. Just take because basically skills have a universal cost. So if you wanted swing true and swing through, they're both when you increase one, the XP for cost for the other skill goes up too, exponentially. So all skills, and that's across. So axe and two-handed sword would both use that. If you had for some reason both two different weapon skills, you would both increase the cost for swing through. If you increase swing through, you'd also increase great swordsman's counter. For example, the cost for great swordsman counter. So be very careful and only pick the skills you want. Don't pick duplicates. Don't pick duplicates or something that you're just never going to use. Very important in that regard. So let's move on. let's go to two-handed sword skill. Okay, that's gonna be these. All the two-handed are the same as the one-handed. So the sword being kind of mixed, mace being control, and axe being damage, pretty much outright. Pole weapons, again, all exposes. They're gonna be all exposes. You can actually hold them in one hand. They're not two-handed weapons, meaning you can actually have a spear scabbard or something like that in your other hand if you wanted to actually just use one and not use blocking or things like that. So keep that in mind. I've actually sometimes had it say that I couldn't hold certain things in my offhand. So be careful, because it may be picky on what it lets you hold in your offhand. I believe you can hold a shield just fine, and a scabbard just fine for your correct weapon. But I think other things it's not a fan of. Medium armor. It's okay, so all the armors are pretty much the same. They're gonna just be called. They're gonna have knight. They're gonna have soldier, rogue, or I should say rogue, soldier, and knight. Rogue's going to be for light armor, medium armor is soldier, and heavy armor is knight. They're all going to increase. You're going to get targetable buffs. Targetable buff. You can target and increase someone's slashing resistance, someone's mace resistance or blunt resistance, and someone's resistance to piercing. You can only have one on a person at a time. So you have to be really careful, because those can be tricky. So you can end up being on a weird spot with that, on what exactly you find the best thing to do with that. So pick responsibly. That's all I gotta say. We're gonna move on to, and then the last thing, or I should say, the last thing is a targetable defense, which will stack with the resistances. So you can use the targetable defense, the last maneuver that you get when you're in your round, like skill 100%, something like that. You get a fourth maneuver in which you can use a defense. So keep that in mind. When those will stack, and you can target other people, which is the good thing versus something like parrying or something like that, which only has self abilities. But self and targetable won't stack if they're the same ability. So self defense and a targetable defense will not stack. So if you're going to get a targetable defense, and it's going to be higher than your self-defense, just stick with a targetable one, because you target a friend. Especially if you play multiplayer. Blacksmithing, pretty much, that means that your character is going to be a crafter. You do not actually have to play a fighter in the game. Not at all. You can totally play as a crafter. One of my characters that is my most high-leveled is a miner, because they're just... It's really easy to get XP from mining, which you get with, I should say, that two-handed axes goes to pickaxes. Two-handed hammers go to gardening tools. So if you want to farm, you have to use two-handed hammers. You have to have the two-handed hammer skill. If you want to mine, you have to have the two-handed miner skill. If you want to mine, I should say, city resources. If you want to mine city resources, you actually have to have the relevant skill. So, two-handed hammer for farming, two-handed axe for mining. Sword doesn't give you anything resource-wise. Spear for grave digging, and find you artifacts. And I highly recommend getting a treasure guide there. So that's to cover pretty much all the things you might need for farming. I may have forgotten one, but not off the top of my head. Oh yeah, and one-handed axe for cutting down trees. And I don't think one-handed hammer. I don't think one-handed hammer does anything. I think it's just one-handed axe. All right, so let's keep moving. So blacksmith basically is just a skill in making that. You do get some fire exposes. I can't go back, but you do get a fire expose and fire resistance. So not bad if you're thinking maybe of a fire elementalist who just happens to have a lot of strength for some reason, or has enough strength. Because I believe lowering your strength, I don't think you can increase your intellect with it. Not entirely sure, but I do know that it's just something to keep in mind. So berserker, now Berserker skill directly increases your damage. So a lot of skills have hidden abilities. Not all of them am I totally sure of yet, all the hidden little nooks and crannies. But Berserker 100% does improve your damage. And Weapon Master 100% increases your attack rating. Attack rating, basically your ability to hit them. As long as they're within range. They can jump out of your range and it won't matter. Berserker is damage, and it's going to give you a self-strength buff. It's going to give you a damage buff, I think. Which, if you're doing Axe and Berserker, watch out, because some of these guys have overlap. Yeah, it gives a Battle Rage, which is a damage buff. Pick whichever one you're going to have higher. If you're going to do that double axe using or axe using Berserker, if you're going to have Berserker higher, pick Battle Rage. If you're going to have your weapon higher, pick your weapon. I believe your weapon just affects the ability, pretty much your ability of your skills. The ability of your skills relevant to it, and possibly how good your weapon's used. That one's kind of a little vague. Same thing with armors. Armors, I'd like to think they increase your defense rating, but it's hard to tell if it's noticeable with that armor. But I have to do some more research into that. But basically, just if you want to be able to buff other people with defense, consider armor. But either way, back onto Berserker. You get a fear immunity buff, which if you've ever been constantly feared in this game, you can appreciate that with Passion of Battle. And you get Berserker, which is a melee fear control. Which means you can now fear the enemy without having to be magical. So that's great. You can whenever you swing, anyone you hit, you can end up fearing. Might not, but you can. Now you got Weapon Master. Well, Weapon Master is going to give you. Did I skip over to that? Here, Weapon Master. Weapon Master is going to give you. What do we got here? So, and all this information's on their website, on his website too, if you wanted to follow along. It's gonna strength buff, attack buff, knockback immunity, and knockback control. So it's gonna be so again, strength buff, any buff, make sure it's your highest stat or highest skill or especially with armor, if you're having armor that increases skills, make sure the one that you're using the most buffs of is the one that you're getting, because it affects the duration and the effect of the ability. So consider that. The only thing I would exclude from that is maybe you could totally have your weapon skill the highest too, if it doesn't, even if it doesn't have buffs, just because it's very important, especially if you're a damage kind of dealer. Strength buff, attack buff. So this is going to overlap a little bit with axes again because of attack buff. Master's Footing, which is the knockback immunity, and knockback control, which, to be honest, knockback is rough. It's kind of like fear, but sometimes it's not so important, especially now you do it to other people, which I guess that's really good, because you might use this with if you're a mixed class between. Because there's a samurai class you can pick, or you can try to go for by wearing all of the new Xianga armor. You can switch over to them and become a samurai class, which involves, I believe, Sword Master? I don't know if they'd use Weapon Master or not. But if they do use Weapon Master, I can actually tell you some of the classes here. I think they use Swords Master rather than Weapon Master. Let's take a look here. They're going to use... I think I skipped them. They're going to use the... here we go. Yeah, they use Weapon Master and Sword Master, which is the Dexterity equivalent, which we'll get to. So if you wanted to do that, they can. That's something that's good for on their part. So Dagger skill. Dagger is what your rogues... Now we're starting to get into the... Now we've entered the realm of dexterity-based traits. Everything we've done with that before, so far before, medium armor, we'll call it. I'll just read it down just so we get a summary again. sword, hammer, axe, two-handed of the equivalent, pole arms, medium armor, parrying, blacksmithing, and berserker and weapon master are all strengths, meaning the higher strength, higher those will do. So on to dexterity, we got the dagger, which is first with dexterity. I believe you're gonna hold 2 daggers. Opening stab, wounding stab, which is attack debuff and then a damage debuff. Pommel strike, stun, which is a stun, and then rogue's defense, which is a defense, self-defense buff, which you have to consider if you're going into light armor, because all the armor is going to have a defense buff. A targetable one, which is arguably better because it can do you and others. So if you're going to light armor, just consider which one you want to get that from. Archery, archer's aim, which is self-attack buff. Opening shot, piercing exposed, because all arrows are going to pretty much do piercing. Aim shot, melee defense debuff, and snaring shot, snare control. Snare is basically a movement debuff, rather than a straight stun. Light armor, which we've kind of gone over, all armors are the same, just which armor type. Light armor is going to weigh you down the least. You're going to be able to move around a lot. Medium armor is going to weigh you down some. And heavy armor is going to give you the best protection, but you're going to get slow. So you're going to have to really invest in your run skill if you want to move anywhere. Anytime fast. You can get horses, but you can't take them on carriages with you. You'll have to either journey all the way you want on your own, or just do without, or find a horse there and bring it back to the carriage point. Evasion is going to be your kind of defense skill for dexterity. Actually, I can show you here. Whoop. I forgot. Okay, so archery, we went light armor. Okay, so this is going to go to assassination. So now it's time for me to probably just really quickly mention parry, evasion, and blocking. I want to just show you those, but we're going to go over them later. Okay, so assassination, we'll skip over that. Assassination is with you suppose. Okay, so you can use an antidote, which is poison resistance, poison expose. Then you have a poison expose, poison damage, and a damage buff. So definitely good for if using basically an element that most people aren't going to be aren't going to be resistant to. Most people are going to have physical resistances, so definitely something that will pay off is exposes for physical things. With spear, for example, could pay off because a lot of people tend to have very high exposes, like a spear or any of the weapons. Exposes can pay off pretty highly, and other things will pay off as well. So just consider that. The different ones are going to be helpful. So in different situations, but you're going to get more of the damage resistance away if you're doing a physical expose. But making someone very weak to poison is very good, so not a problem at all. Then we got scouting, which is going to basically be your perception check. You'll be able to see enemies from further away. Basically, if they're hiding, you can see them. You can do self-running buff, jumping buff, invisibility block, which basically makes will get rid of people's invisibility and track, see invisible. So that's where you get the see invisible there. Okay, so let's go on to rogue. Now this is the vice versa of scouting. So rogue is going to be lockpicking, believe it or not. And even though you can find keys fairly easy, so really determine if you want lockpicking. Consider it. Just really consider it if you want lockpicking, because you can find lockpicks, but you can also find keys by killing people. So it'll probably save you time. It'll probably be really good if you're trying to not kill enemies and you're just trying to sneak by them. But if you're gonna go and kill everyone anyway, you'll probably find a key. Be really sure you pick with discretion, because you will get your resources back when you respec. But finding the respec place can be a bit rough if you don't know where it is. And cost, and basically, unless you own the city, you won't get your cost back. I believe that's how it is. If you respec, if you own the city, you'll get everything you paid for it back. But if you don't own the city, that you're gonna have to basically raise all the money to level up again. Depending on how far leveled you are, that could be a bad thing, or not meaningful at all. Because I will say, money in this game is fairly easy to get. It's just a matter of how fast you can do it, to be totally honest. Steal, take others' inventory, which could be really fun. You need to be invisible for that, so consider it before you pick it. And backstab. Now, I've heard people have a hard time with backstab sometimes because it doesn't do as much damage as they really expect it should. I'd pick with discretion. I think that if you want just an opener, right? If you want an opener and you just want to really kind of get a rogue feel, sure. But you probably could do more damage elsewhere. Unless something changes or has changed with backstab. Some of the balancing isn't perfect, but the developer has been pretty active about pretty much putting a lot of new stuff into the game. So consider that too. So now we got trapping, making traps. Believe it or not, I've actually never used the trap in the game yet. I have tons of traps, but never really used them. You can create traps, make stuff. You can actually find traps too. So just consider that too. Basically a crafting skill. Think of it like that. But if you have wizardry or sorcery, you can make a magic trap or add magic to a trap. So if you like to make traps and you want to just put traps everywhere, which could be hilarious, I imagine it could be just absolutely hilarious, then consider that. Okay, so either way, we're going to go down to tailoring here. So tailoring, we're going to say, hold on, what do we got here? Weaving cloth and, okay. So tailoring is basically another crafting skill and targetable, and unlike blacksmith, instead of blacksmith being expose others to fire and resist fire, it's expose others to cold and resist cold. So same thing of blacksmith, flip it, and a dexterity buff instead of strength. So it's pretty much everything flipped, with the last thing being a skill buff. Fletching, that's how you make your arrows, because you will need arrows if you're a bow-based character. Oh, actually, I need to make sure. There we go. Stay on there. Fletching. Reading from my notes, reading from kind of a little guide here. I got here too. There we go. So fletching should let you whenever. So fletching is basically arrow crafting. Not much to explain there, other than it's arrow crafting. Swordsmaster is the dexterity version of. Oh, and also it's piercing. It can do piercing exposes fletching. Swordsmaster is pretty much we call it the all your dexterity abilities for swords: attack buff, damage buff, stun, and a slashing damage skill. Unarmed is basically going to be, you can do tavern brawling, which can be kind of fun, but it's also a dexterity skill, which is going to give you attack buff, a defense debuff, a crushing expose, and a crushing damage. We're going to move on to staff. Then we go call it staff is going to do another. It's also going to do a stun, knockback control, snare control, and a fear control. All melee abilities, so all hitting abilities. Our abilities you have to hit your enemy with. Heavy armor, and then we're on to Constitution. Oop, I need to catch us up here. So Swordsmaster, unarmed, staff. Now heavy armor. Heavy armor, we already know it's all the armors are the same, just with heavy armor variant. Athletics is going to affect your athletics, believe it or not. So you can you get a lot of self buffs with this one. You can what do we call it? A jump buff, a run buff, health recovery buff, constitution buff. Basically all this. And constitution, that's pretty much it. Other than blocking. Yeah, it's done. Yeah, constitution's got very little stuff to it. Wizardry and sorcery are interesting. They're the same thing kind of, but with different focuses. Sorcery is focused on the weapon, and wizardry is not. Both use the wizardry channel text channel, so you can like say things into it and then use their special spells. So keep in mind, both of them have the same abilities though, with just different names: an intelligence buff, magic recovery buff, attack buff, and an intelligence buff. Necromancy is interesting. Disease exposed and disease damage. You can summon undead, with a dead body, or restore dead to undead. Okay. Health drain, and you can read dead script. So necromancy right there. So as it says, trainer difficult to find. I think there's like one trainer in the world. So you might want to pick protect trainer or protect world if you're doing that, just in case he dies, so that if you want to do necromancy, he's still around. Elementalists, all the elemental abilities are easier ways of doing magic. But at the same time, you can do with sorcery or wizardry, you can do more. So you can combine them together to do more, or just utilize these ones here and just get a few of their abilities. All of them are going to be pretty much the same, just different types of their, like Earthlink doing crushing burst, crushing damage, resistance, and then area damage. Yeah, in fact, all of them are that way, just different types of damage there. Alchemy is somewhere. We're going to skip all the way over to alchemy then, because they're all going to be the same except for... Okay, so alchemy, crafting skill, as you predicted it, probably. It's going to be magic resistance. Okay, so it's a magic resistance and magic exposed, though, for their exposes. Warding is offensive protection spells, which would be interesting. They get a targetable stun, a targetable knockback control, and a targetable stare, and a targetable fear control. So they got some neat stuff, some neat like control abilities. Something to consider if you're gonna have some magic. So summoning. So let's go straight into here. Basically, you summon different types of elementals: earth, ice, fire, and electric. Everything but earth requires a emerald. A gray emerald for ice, red emerald for fire, and orange for electric. For which that's all there. Conjuring is... let's move on to conjuring. Conjuring can basically conjure you items and stuff. So you can conjure plenial armor, so conjure armor, and conjure a crushing, piercing, or slashing weapon. Pretty easy. Then Scion. Now Scion says it specifically can affect humans, but I will show you right here that I don't think that that's absolutely accurate. So I don't know what's going on there. Because I'm pretty sure I can have anyone as that. I don't know. Maybe they won't train me. But it's kind of interesting. So if you watched our if you've been watching our playthrough, you'll notice it has a familiar ability because it can do a targetable slashing damage and targetable slashing over time. You notice it's somewhat familiar because that's kind of what our abilities do, except we're just doing only over time damage. Alright, so and he also can do a levitation buff, slashing damage shield, and item lightning buff. So consider that. Battle magic, it's going to basically be magic armor. Same thing as armor, just magic. Okay, so we don't need to explain anything else, I think. With that. And gem cutting, which is going to be another crafting skill. And it's crushing resistance and crushing expose. So battle magus and then gem cutting. Okay, healing. Now we're getting into the faith-based skills. Because we were just in the intelligence. I think I may have not bookmarked those quite clearly. But as soon as we got into the magics, all the magics are intelligence, and heavy armor blocking and athletics are all constitution. Okay, so let's go ahead and get down to faith-based skills. Healing is literally get a heal over time, healed. So target, literally something called healed. Targetable health % heal, and raise dead. So you can literally raise the dead back to life. So maybe something you could consider if you're thinking of doing some leading if you're trying to lead people. So you bring people back to life. Then you get Priest of the Allfather Odin. Now you get like all the specific religions here. So Priest of the Allfather Odin. I would really recommend looking at the DarkDIRE website to really learn more about the lore about these. Basically, think Old Church. Lemiter, think Druids. Archer Druids. So Allfather Odin gets Holy Resistance buff, Protection buff, Holy Damage and Stun Control, and Holy Resistance buff. Druid Mother of Lemiter gets Heal, Wolf Shape, Self-Protection buff, Lion Shape, and Charm NPC. Blesser of Juno, which is the next one, which is basically think New Church. So while the Allfather Odin, Old Church, think New Church for Blesser of Juno, because basically they come in kind of later on, and kind of basically same religion, just different person that they're focusing on. They're gonna be a lot more kind of paladin-y, I guess you could say, in my personal opinion, with how they act, but their skills are pretty much good across the board. Because they get a strength buff, dexterity buff, constitution buff, and intelligence buff. Really good or really bad if you already have everything you need. If you're strength only, right, you're probably going to already have a skill that gives you a strength buff. So, you know, it's going to be kind of complicated. Good for a leader, though. Good for a leader. If you're trying to buff, like, you buff your archer that's with you with the dexterity buff, or buff the soldier with you with a strength buff, or so on, or give yourself a constitution buff because everybody can use a constitution buff. Things like that. Monk of Tyr, you got with them, you got Zen Endurance, with Zen Health, Zen Damage, and Zen Attack. They're basically going to be the counterpart. They're kind of like the counterpart of the Juno group because they're supposed to be like siblings. But he's stamina recovery, health recovery, damage buff, and attack buff. So he kind of has some overlap. So consider that if you're doing something with that. Then you got Slave of Ares Set. So these guys are basically just like they're supposed to be like evil. So it's like an evil spirit possessing a formerly good archmage, or formerly a friend of, what do we call it, archmage, and he's like now totally possessed. So Ares, I think, was like the name of the archmage, and Set was the actual thing possessing him. So you consider that when you're picking it. Let's go consider what kind of character you want to play. You get a melee remove buff, remove debuff, self undead form after death. So you can turn undead if you die, which is pretty cool if you're doing roguelike, or die in a dungeon, because dungeons are always roguelike. Balls animation is the name of the skill, or Bowls animation, or whatever. Summon pet undead. You can summon undead. So it would actually kind of work with necromancy too, if you wanted to, or restore dead to undead. But it kind of, I guess, all like they both kind of do the same thing a little bit. Dragon Worshipper. So you could argue that the Ares Set thing is cheap necromancy. Okay, so Dragon Worshipper, Armor of Fire. These guys are, I think, the Dark Elves. The Dar Kelves. They're named, I think, Dar Kelves. Basically worship a dragon. I believe they typically, at least I believe they're the dragon worshippers. Yeah, even teaching them the Dar. Okay, so they're gonna be. Hold on, let me go back. They can actually turn into a dragon if they have dragon's blood. But they get self fire damage, shield, fire damage resistance, and targetable fire and stun, which is actually kind of neat. It literally stuns and fire damage. That's kind of cool. I mean, if I'm gonna hit somebody with something, I mean, kind of good to do two things. But you know, why not both, right? So, Cursor of Baal, weakness curse, clumsiness curse, soul curse, and thought curse. Pretty much all debuffs. Exact opposite of Juno. There we go, Curse of Baal. Which is like someone possessing Set. So it's like Set is possessed by Baal, which is possessing Ares. So you got like 3 deep in that whole thing there. Then you got Shaman of Fenrir. Orcs typically follow this. They call it Voodoo Stamina, Voodoo Health, Voodoo Poison, and Voodoo Charm, which basically does a health to stamina transfer, stamina to health transfer, poison to stun, poison damage and stun, which is kind of cool too, and charm a monster NPC, which sounds pretty cool. Follower of the Titans, which again is what we're doing in our playthrough, which is basically you get a damage over time of all the physical types. So all the different physical types you do. So slashing, piercing, and damage, and then you get lightning too, which is kind of cool. So I think I think all of them are damage over time, I believe. Every single one's a damage over time, yeah. So kind of cool if you want just like a ton of things hurting them all at once. But don't expect to kill people quickly. I will tell you from my experience. They do very little damage. Any damage over time will. Lightning tends to do the best. I would say Spear matches well with these guys if you want to use all the exposes, but you can like poke them a little bit and get rid of all their heavy armor that's blocking them from actually getting hurt by any of your mace, knife, and arrow call abilities. Prior of the Temple, basically, we call it, if you want to play kind of like a paladin character who wants to burn everything, some Warhammer kind of Inquisitor stuff going on, you can do Prior of the Temple, which is with Blessed Flame, Lady Gabrielle's Touch, which is targetable fire damage, Give to Lady Gabrielle, which is Stamina Drain, and Sacrifice for the Lady, which is Health Drain. So drains and fire damage, stuff like that, and a fire over time. So I'll let you see that real quick. Whoop. Fire of the Temple. Then you have Exorcism, which is going to basically be anti-undead. It's like the opposite of Necromancy. Turn undead, Holy Blessing, Holy Fire, Splash Holy Water, Exorcism Balm, and Rhyming is also after that. So, I just skipped right into the next skill. Okay, hold on. So Turn Undead, which is Fear Control and for Undead, Targetable Disease Resistance, Holy Fire, Target Fire over damage, we call it Splash Holy Water, which is Holy Damage over time, requiring Holy Water, and Exorcism Balm, which is something you can create with an empty jar. And then Rhyming, which is finally your Bard, which you're able to combine music and magic into illusion, which gives you captive audience, self AoE, magic damage, stun control, which is so AoE damage and stun control, requiring a musical instrument. Deceptive Painting, which is charm humanoid NPC with a musical instrument. Actor's Disguise, Shapeshift with a musical instrument and culture scroll, and Poet's Dialogue, self-language translator, requiring musical instrument and a cultural scroll. Okay, so that's pretty much, we've gone through all the skills. Hold on, let me show you. Rhyming, there we go. This guy's showing him with his little loot. So we've done an entire skill overview, with the exception of our defensive skills. Parrying, we'll have to jump right back up. And all those ones I just did were faith, so all of them are based off of faith. So parrying is based off strength, and will give you the ability to parry. And if you press your defend button, which I didn't even know for a long time in the game existed, you get a much higher chance to defend, which is great. So just consider that you could do that. I don't think you always need to do it. You can still parry. You can still parry without it. So and you can sometimes have a pretty good chance to parry without it. But either way, so let's go with parry. Parry giving you a self-defense buff, which you have to compare with armor to see which one you want. Item strength buff, which you want to cast on every item you have. If you have parry, cast the item strength buff on every item you have. It's going to increase your strength. It's going to make every item increase your strength. And since strength is probably going to be your thing, if you're using parrying, increase it. And it doesn't overlap with anything because it's an item buff, not a self buff. So it won't counter anything else out. Parry conditioning, which is stamina recovery buff, which can be good if you're using a lot of stamina, or just convenient. It's not necessary, I'd say, if you do enough damage to kill everything instantly, but it can just be convenient so you don't have to rest as much. 2. or it could save your life if you use stamina like a fiend. Focus parrying, instant parrying buff, which will make you very difficult to kill. Then you got the the evasion. I was gonna say blocking probably next. Or no, it says evasion. Evasion. That now parrying, the guy needs to be in front of you for you to block him. He's got to be in front of you to block him. Evasion requires no such thing. So consider that evasion has your back on literally in this case. You don't need to actually be facing them to block or evade. And blocking is another one you need to do facing. It's Constitution instead. Oh, evasion. I should mention evasion skills real quick, which include a self-defense buff, dexterity buff, stamina recovery buff, and an instant evasion buff. So let's go down to blocking. Blocking is going to give you pretty much the same thing: a defense buff, Constitution buff, instead of obviously earlier. So all these skills will give you a way of improving a stat by improving all the items you're wearing. Blocking, conditioning, and focus blocking. This requires a shield, but it's Constitution instead. So that's it. Yeah, I hope you guys have enjoyed my little overview. I hope to go over some more stuff in the future. Basically, this was just all the skills. All the skills I wanted to go over. I'll probably go over different races and cultures in another video. But hopefully, so this one doesn't go on too long. But thanks for watching. You guys have a good one. All right. See you guys later.